Okay, so we have a very rare opportunity here to be talking with Sean from Kickstarter, which is a community of 20 million people that's now going on the path and exploring the path of decentralization. And I think it's an incredible opportunity that we have to be in conversation with Sean today. So can I get a quick, make some noise if you've used Kickstarter before? Make some noise if you have supported a campaign on Kickstarter. Yeah?
Thank you.
And make some noise if you've launched a campaign on Kickstarter. Can you get some whoops?
Let me see a creator. There's got to be one here.
Well, that is on my bucket list for sure. It's to launch a Kickstarter campaign. Okay. Are you ready to get started, Sean?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so why don't, we've got a lot of things that we can cover here. But why don't we actually just start with what brought you to Kickstarter? And if you could just share a little bit about Kickstarter's mission, what it's about, what is the essence of what Kickstarter is?
Yeah, so Kickstarter's mission that maybe people might know is that we help bring creative projects to life. We've been around since 2009. And I joined the company about 6.5 years ago. I've always been really passionate about independent arts and creativity and just wanting to see the world to be, more diverse, beautiful, inspiring. And I was previously in China for a while working on a social networking site for Chinese artists and musicians, moved back to the US, worked at Facebook at the time for a few years, wanted to get back to what I'm most passionate about, and that was Kickstarter. So that's the short of it.
I love it. And tell me about, what was your first exposure to crypto and to Web3? What was that initial seed for you?
For me, I've always been kind of just like interested in technology, grew up in Silicon Valley, played around with different things. I think the thing that clicked for me when around at least Web3 was, I think I had registered an ENS domain for myself, and then when I immediately got a governance proposal put in front of me, and I'm like, oh shit, I can actually have a voice in this, and I can delegate it, and that was kind of the moment that clicked for me, that this feels a little bit different than the average kind of Web 2 experience, where you're just more of a passive participant than somebody who is feeling some sort of ownership or control over the future of the whole project.
I love that. And so maybe give us a sense as to when Kickstarter was thinking about, hey, decentralization is something we might want to even consider. What was that like? How did that conversation come to be at the company?
Yeah, so I would say it's maybe a little over a year ago. I think we were watching the trends with Web3 and crypto and just, various people inside the company, including Fred Wilson is a very long time board member. Chris Dixon is one of our early angel investors. And so we had a little crew of people both on the management team as well as on the board and advisors who were either deeply involved in these trends or interested in them. So that was, happening, and a lot of just interest there. On the other hand, there was just looking at the Kickstarter business for the last decade, we're super proud of the impact we're able to have every year and the companies and weird projects that come out of it. But at the same time, it's still only about 20,000 creative projects come out to life through Kickstarter a year, which is great. But we think this model of crowdfunding where you cut out the gatekeepers should be way bigger. I mean, think about just the Bay Area. How many people have an idea for a creative project? It's a lot more than 20,000. So then you multiply that by the states and countries. We just think that we're scratching the surface with the potential of crowdfunding, and it's, I would say it's plateaued a bit over the last 3 or 4 years. So that we're looking at that problem on one hand, then we looked at all these new tools, and we're like, okay, is there a way that rather than just operating as Kickstarter, the 90-person company trying to move this industry forward, how could we harness a larger ecosystem of people that all believe in crowdfunding, all believe in wanting to have more creative projects in the world together? And so you look at a lot of the tools that are in the kind of the Web3 toolkit around building trust among a bunch of participants who don't know each other, the ability to incentivize people through different mechanisms. And so that was kind of the genesis of it about 16 months ago.
Wow, I love that. And what was that? So like, you're there, you're thinking about, okay, you're seeing these trend lines. Like, how do we unlock more creative potential? And on one side, you're seeing these trend lines and seeing, great, we've got a whole new set of tools. What was, when you think about what is the grandest vision of what Kickstarter could be, what was the vision that was unfolding at that point of like what decentralization might be able to offer Kickstarter in its vision?
Yeah, I think that we, again, there's not that, the way that crowdfunding has shook out is like there's not that many large platforms doing it. I mean, you can name most of them if you're in the industry, and internationally there are a lot of very small ones, but it's like 5 people, maybe 10 people running that, and everybody's kind of operating in their own little silo, trying to either survive or trying to make a business. And it's like, okay, everybody who's in this business is pretty mission driven, in the same way that everybody who's interested in Celo is also has values. And so I think our idea is like, okay, how can we start going to these different smaller ecosystem players, whether they're running a crowdfunding site or they're helping advise creators how to run a better project, they're helping creators fulfill on their project. Like, how do we start linking those people together so that we can all, as a group, work together? So I think that, if this works out well, everybody is collaborating in the same way to solve the big problems around crowdfunding, which are things like, how do you, if you're a creator and you have an idea for something, you've got 30 days to find every potential interested backer in the world for that thing. That's a lot of fucking pressure because if you don't get them, you might not get your funding. So how do we solve that problem, which is perennial. Another one is how do we solve the problem of trust? I think many people have had a bad experience with crowdfunding because it's I expected this thing to come on this date or at this quality level and it never did. So how do we pool together some of the experts in the industry to start contributing to those problems? And so it's not just us trying to do this as a siloed organization.
Totally. And and what were some of those others, just to even great, the crowdfunding, the problems that you guys were facing, what were some of the other ones that you guys were also looking at that hey, maybe there's a pathway here if we all work together? What were some of those other pain points that you were experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, again, the 2 big ones that we're trying to focus on is what we call project reach, so allowing a project to reach the maximum number of backers, and the other is around trust, just people feeling trusted in crowdfunding. So an example of something that we're working on right now with the protocol we're building out is something called multi-listing, which would essentially allow, you're building your project on Kickstarter, instead of just launching it on Kickstarter, there would be a toggle to launch it on other multiple crowdfunding sites at the same time, so you're getting access immediately to more audiences. And then we would be doing a fee split with the other clients, other crowdfunding platforms, so that everybody is rewarded properly. But at the end of the day, it doesn't, for a creator or a backer, the experience doesn't change. You're not necessarily pledging with crypto. You're not having to set up a wallet. But at the end of the day, you're getting more pledges, which ultimately is what we're trying to drive to, is how do we actually solve the real problems in front of them? We're not trying to go blockchain, just dogmatic for that.
Yeah, I love that. That's it's because it's such a real use case. It's how do we expand, right? To reach for these creators that want to get funding, and then allow for new forms of capital and people who want to back projects or particular kinds of projects to be able to access them as well. It's a quintessential, even a marketplace, right? So, I feel like there's a few jumping off points, but I love this lens around ecosystem-driven development and how do we build an ecosystem. I feel like Celo has done such a great job of that. How did you choose or think about Celo when, great, we might want to decentralize? How did you think about who to partner with in that sort of exploration?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of us, like me, I didn't come with a ton of crypto experience to it, but we did have Fred and Chris and other people who are in the industry. I think when we were looking at the different options out there and knowing that we were a pretty big Web 2 platform, that a lot of the different L1s would be interested in having us, we just kind of went through our criteria. Some of it was very technical, of EVM compatibility and just a lot of the stuff that our engineering people looked at. But then honestly, I think it came down to values and the developer ecosystem that Celo had. And I think as our founder said, like, Celo is the one that he thought had a conscience, while, a lot of the other. And so I think like we found that in the conversations we've had with the community events, or just getting very close with Sep and Renee and Merrick, and like the team at Celo has just been very like welcoming and really trying to drive towards like real solutions rather than just like, how do we make this number go up? Because, the other thing I didn't mention about Kickstarter is we're a public benefit corporation, so we are, rather than being legally bound to just maximize profit, we have our charter, which sets out, okay, we are legally bound actually to help less commercial creators, to never pursue esoteric tax loopholes, like all of the things that you want to do as a founder to like set in stone the ideals, like we're able to find a legal structure to do that. And I think, so when we're evaluating different, partners and different chains to work with, like we were looking for a similar mentality. And that's where we ended up with Celo.
I love that. And so walk us, I would love to hear a little bit more about what that exploration has been like. So, okay, you had this intention. Celo is, is a great partner in this. What have been some of the things you've learned? What has the journey, since been like? Just could you speak to, what have you found along the way?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one. It's been almost a year. We announced, that we wanted to explore this direction, announce the partnership with Celo, and it was met with, in many of our existing creator communities, with a lot of skepticism and backlash, to be totally honest. And I think it's like, honestly, a lot of it was warranted in the sense that like, we didn't give enough details when we said that we were going to do this. And there's a lot of creators who rely on Kickstarter for their livelihood. Like literally they run multiple projects a day. And when they don't know anything about Web3, nothing about crypto. And they're like, we're going to be moving. They thought we were going to like pick up Kickstarter and put it on a blockchain, whatever that means, or that they were going to be forced to use crypto payments, or that like they wouldn't be able to like, fund their project anymore. So like, I think it was a valid criticism and backlash that we learned, and we got a lot of learnings from that. But I think that we've been able to try to communicate with people like nothing's going to change overnight. People are going to be involved. We set up a community advisor council that's been giving us a lot of like feedback. And for us, like we don't have a choice. We can't just, it doesn't make sense with 20 million users to like just only go after like crypto natives or people who are very passionate about that community. Like we need to find very smart ways to get people warmed up to the value and actually show it to them. So that's what we're focused on now, that and building out the team.
I love that. And wow, that's, from this like last 1 year period, if you could maybe take away like one key lesson for anybody maybe that's in a similar transition, is there anything that you could speak to, like one key lesson from this past year of like exploring this while also having a community that's like very, maybe like across all backgrounds and diverse? Any lessons for anybody maybe that's in a similar transition or thinking about something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think spend a bunch of time with your existing users to understand how they would like react to this. I don't think that we did a good enough job of that, of just like, who are your core users and like, how do they feel about, any new plans that can like, save you a lot of time after the fact. And then it's just like, focus on, I think this even came up I overheard at the last panel, like, just focus on real world value. It seems simple, but like, I think that gets lost a lot when we're talking about crypto or any really new technology. It's like, you get, obsessed with like what it can do as like a cool, science experiment or something to make you look cool online, but like, is it actually creating real value for somebody in the world? And so like, just keep asking yourself that question.
So real. I feel like that is like a guiding North Star for the ecosystem. So, where you guys are, I know you mentioned this before. So you guys have, I think, right, a separate entity, right, that's like doing some of the exploration here. Could you just maybe speak to like, how did you actually set up the structure? Where are things now? And how are you approaching the sort of exploration in parallel with what you guys have already built up with the Kickstarter ecosystem?
Yeah, so Kickstarter is a 95-person company. We're all remote. We used to be based in New York, but we're kind of spread out everywhere. We set up a separate company. It's also a public benefit corporation. Right now it's called the Creative Crowdfunding Protocol, PBC. Really catchy. We should have a new name and brand that's going to come out in the coming months. So we set it up as a separate company. We want it to be able to like move fast, be kind of more of like an R&D organization. We're giving it, in that company right now, we have 2 full-time people. We have a CTO, as well as a head of operations, and then we have a bunch of contractors that are working on kind of the core protocol and different pieces of the protocol. And then from the Kickstarter side, we're dedicating a bunch of our kind of just expertise about crowdfunding. Like we've been looking at the same problems in crowdfunding for a decade. So like, how do we take all that institutional knowledge, pass it on to the protocol organization so that they can start activating an ecosystem to start solving those problems? So like, how do we pose a problem, to the ecosystem and say, rather than it's just us trying to come up with the answer, can we have tens of people, hundreds of people trying to, solicit or to propose solutions to those problems? So we've set up that. That's the separate organization. We're trying to hire a head of product. So if anybody's interested or knows, please come talk to me. And then we're also working, I'll mention we're also working with one other organization called Apiary. There's actually a woman here from it. I don't know where she is, but, hey, Hannah. That is we invested in this, it's basically an applied research organization just looking at Web3 governance, because we think governance is going to be, super important to what we do, because we're really trying to stay mission-driven with the incentives in the protocol rather than just fully profit maximizing.
Yeah, I love that. Could you touch a little bit too on like what are the building blocks of the protocol? How are you envisioning it? What are the things that are coming together that are core to what you imagine this creative crowdfunding protocol to be?
Yeah, so I think at the core of the protocol, there's a couple pieces to it. So there's like, we want to start defining what the data sharing schema would be for like a crowdfunding campaign generally. So like what goes into the building blocks of a crowdfunding campaign so that can be universal across other clients, whether they're ones that exist now or ones that would show up in the future. So that would be one. Another would be, how do we do a fee split? So like if multiple ecosystem players are contributing to the success of a project, how do we split the fee? Right now, Kickstarter gets a 5% fee, and we use Stripe. How would we, in a future world, split that fee up between multiple people who are helping bring more creative projects to life, or higher quality creative projects to life, or more diverse creative projects to life? So the fee split would be enabled by smart contracts that would be on the protocol.
I love that. Are there any gaps that you see currently that that either need to be built, or things that are like to fully realize this vision, things that you see needing to come together?
I mean, I would say 95% of it is gaps at this point, and 5% is like what we're. Yeah. I mean, at this point, we're really just trying to validate some of these hypotheses we have, like this multi-listing idea of like, can you raise more money? We have a hypothesis that you could raise more money if your project was on multiple clients or crowdfunding sites than if you just launched on one, because you can access. We want to validate that. We're doing that in a very Web 2 fashion now. We're just manually going to launch projects simultaneously on our platform as well as another one that I can't mention right now, and see like what is the incremental value. And then like, of course we could have a contract between us and that platform that says like, okay, let's share our data and let's split the fees. But if we really want to scale that, I think in a really trustworthy way, I think you want that done through a protocol where everything is published back to a blockchain in a way that people can trust. So, I mean, some of this comes back to my experience. I worked at Facebook when we launched the Facebook platform, where all of these third parties were building businesses because they would get distribution and newsfeed. Yeah. And if you remember that period, like games and media sites and like Simar just watched this sketchy video on whatever, and that was published to all your followers. Facebook realized that was a really bad experience, and they dialed down distribution to nothing without any input from the third party. So like, I think about that experience because I lived through it. I was working on the platform, and I think about that when we're doing ecosystem building, which is like, I think developers are smart now that they don't want to trust a central authority who's going to just decide who gets distribution, who gets
Yeah.
money, and that should be more of a decision that's left up to the actual people who are contributing
Yeah.
to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I love that. And so how, so it seems like some of these experiments you're running maybe with Kickstarter as well. How, like, when you think about the protocol, right, and how that interfaces with Kickstarter, how else have you been running these experiments and validating some of these hypotheses? What are some of the other hypotheses that you also have that you're curious to see how they play out?
Yeah, this is the first one that we're validating, so we're still early days.
Yeah.
Another one that like I'm interested in is more on kind of like the trust side of the spectrum. Like, how do you get backers to trust crowdfunding and that their project will be delivered on time, high quality, or that it'll be delivered at all because people have had bad experiences. So one idea we've had is like, how can we get third-party kind of peer reviewers to provide feedback on a project? So like, you come to a project page, somebody says they're going to create the coolest flying drone gadget ever, and there's a third party who's an expert in kind of like supply chain or knows the feasibility of what the creator is actually saying they're doing, and they can provide kind of like feedback that you as the backer can read and say like, okay, now I'm more informed about my decision of do I want to back this project or not.
Yep.
If that is helpful for you making a decision, the third party expert reviewer could get some split of this protocol fee rewarded because they have better informed your decision. So that's another one that we're interested in. We have a list of maybe like 10 or so. And honestly, I think like some of them we're going to try to validate with the protocol team. Some of them I think that we're just going to post online and try to see if other people, hopefully some people in this room, can help contribute solutions to these problems or actually start building features or clients that could start experimenting with these ideas.
I love that. When you start to think about what does a vibrant ecosystem look like, feel like, what does that mean to you at Kickstarter? Like, what would it look like, 10 years down the road? There's a vibrant crowdfunding ecosystem. What is that, in your, you've mentioned crowdfunding sites, you mentioned creators. What are the pieces that bring that together?
Yeah, I think of a couple dimensions. One is just, international reach. I think Celo is a very international global community, and so is crypto generally. Kickstarter is only open in 25 countries as a creator. We can only do a payout to you in 25 countries. Obviously, crypto will, enable that to the 100 plus other countries where a lot of people have a lot of creative ideas and like they're blocked just because we have a traditional payment system.
Yeah.
So I think that is going to contribute to a vibrant ecosystem. I think also just like the use cases of crowdfunding they've just, we've seen them narrow to where Kickstarter has the best product market fit now is like tangible rewards, like a tabletop game or a beautiful design object or a piece of technology or a comic book. But there are like crowdfunding or there's creators in like arts, music, film where the reward may be something digital or an experience or something that's not like going to be delivered to you in the mail. And I think like we want to find ways to support those communities as well because they just haven't done as well on Kickstarter. And so I think that would be another aspect of like vibrancy that we'd want to see.
I love that. With the protocol element, sort of like powering, let's say, this ecosystem, how are you thinking about either launch or like, is it validating some of these hypotheses and then building along the side? Like, how do you think about how this rolls out and how you start to engage stakeholders in the ecosystem with what you're building at the back end,
Yeah, it's a big question for us. I think like we're not, I think we learned our lessons from launching to our user base, like the Kickstarter user base, like too forcefully, and I think we want to be really careful there. I think for this next phase, when we actually do launch a protocol, it's going to be much more about going to developers, and it's more of like a B2B approach. We always need to remember that like creators and backers at the end of the day are going to have an opinion about how crowdfunding may change. But I think the next phase will be about engaging developers who are excited about our mission to bring more creative projects to life and are excited about like contributing to that, whether that's building features or building out clients on the protocol.
For everybody that's here that might be a developer, what does that engagement look like? Is it like collaborating on specific things? Is it, is it still, I mean, it could also be that it's still forming, like what that ask or, ways of collaborating are. How, for somebody who's a developer that wants to support and get involved, what does that look like, at least right now?
Yeah, definitely still forming. I mean, we're literally having a meeting about it today. Don't have a form. I think that, I see it like, there's kind of like two paths. One is more on like the hardcore, like technical side of contributing. Yeah. But then there's also people, like one idea we've had is like, could we create a reference client, like almost like out of the box, really easy for anybody who's excited about maybe enabling crowdfunding in a certain country where we don't exist, yep. Or enabling crowdfunding just around a certain like creative domain. Like you just want to build a Kickstarter version of like anime, and like that's all that it is, and you just curate that. Like, so people who might be passionate about a certain domain, and how can we make it as lightweight as possible for you to like actually run your own client and then get rewarded for that. So that would be some, having some development chops would be helpful, but I think a bigger part is like, can you rally a community around, one specific vertical that might be interesting?
I love that's so cool, and the possibilities there are so immense. It's like what happens when niches can form around particular, kinds of crowdfunding, projects. Like, I just could imagine, to your point, anime or any one of these things, like differentiated brands and sites that are all building on top of the same underlying protocol, right? Supporting each other. Yeah,
totally. I mean, like the beauty of Kickstarter is like the weird niches, just like people get into really interesting, weird stuff. And like, we have a name for it. We call it Weird Starter internally. Because it's like, like we want to see the world, weirder, to be totally honest. And so how do we enable like different niches to flourish, whether that's within Kickstarter as like under this big tent umbrella, that where we are like maybe the aggregator of all these niches, but also some of those people just want to hang out with their own like smaller community and like be around the people that they're around. So I think both of those things can coexist. And for us, as long as like the overall pie is growing, that's what we care about.
Totally. I love that. I think we're just coming to the end of our time now, but maybe as one final question, what's been your favorite Kickstarter project to have launched?
That I've seen launched. That I've backed. Launched. Yeah. So I've backed 650 projects. I just love backing projects. I mean, like, I want to see a world where there's just like small creative projects everywhere. The one that I tell people that is literally my favorite project ever is there's this artist. He lives in Chicago. He's classically trained as a mosaic artist from Italy. The old like little tiles that. Yeah. And it's called the Pothole Art Project. And he would go to he would find potholes in the streets that were like, a nuisance. And he would go in guerrilla style in the middle of the night and like dress up like a construction worker, fill it in, and then he would put like a beautiful mosaic piece of art over the pothole. And I love that idea. I have never seen one in person. I probably never will because it's like where he lives. But I just love the idea that somebody is going to walk down that street, and instead of seeing a pothole, they're going to see a piece of artwork. And like, yes, that's worth $25 from me. And he sent me a little like beautiful print of it. And like, that's the world I want to live in. That's the world I want for my daughters, is one that's like a little bit differentiated. We have this internal like motto inside Kickstarter, which we don't say that much publicly, but like we do internally, which is fuck the monoculture. Like, we don't want to see a world where it's just like, sequels, chain stores, like the sameness that, society can become. And so like, for me, it's like, how do you find those little moments and projects that will like change the way that you think about society?
Love that. That's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a hand for Sean?